Hello, I am Adam Bialek from Wilson Elser, a law firm of approximately 900 attorneys and 39 offices throughout the United States. I want to start by thanking Ron Nolasco at the International Trade Council for providing me with the opportunity to speak with you, and thank all of you for listening. I'm going to speak to you today about a topic that many people take for granted, operating a business in an online environment. If we can move to the next slide, please. Today's discussion will focus on three primary objectives. One, the increase in online business activity and how COVID has changed the landscape. Two, understanding online risks. And three, opportunities for risk mitigation. Next slide, please. So I want you to think back to February, less than a year ago. You were regularly shopping in supermarkets, retail stores, going to movies, going to restaurants. Now, if you're doing any of these things, you're probably doing them less often. However, you have probably moved online and have started shopping online. So when I first started looking at the impact of COVID on e-commerce, I was using statistics primarily from June 2020. For me in New York, that was a high point for the first part of the crisis in my region. Obviously, that's changed, and we're probably now at a high point. We've seen the wave go down and up again, and one thing's been clear. The businesses that have survived, and many have, they've thrived, partly because they've moved online. So starting with June, year-over-year sales increased 76.2%, and similar increases were seen month after month as the trend toward online business continued. Next slide, please. Well, COVID clearly made an impact on online commerce, so much so that during the holiday season, the U.S. Postal Service had to post a notice telling people that their packages might not make it there in time for the holidays. So while some of the issues were related to employees being absent from work due to COVID, the majority of the delays were due to the increased volume. Next slide, please. Online shopping was growing so fast in 2020 that it was expected to hit $4 trillion in 2020, with the U.S. alone expecting to have approximately 300 million online shoppers by 2023, or approximately 91% of the country's population. Now you need to think about that. 91% of the population was going to be shopping online in the next 2 years. Over the last few years, e-commerce has become an indispensable part of the global retail framework. In 2019, an estimated 1.92 billion people, so almost 2 billion people, purchased goods or services online. And e-retail sales surpassed $3.5 trillion worldwide. And again, that was before COVID. So it's probably much higher now. E-commerce is expected to grow. E-commerce software provider Commerce Hub released survey results on October 5th, 2020, finding that 67% find it more convenient to buy online rather than in stores. And a whopping 89% plan to continue spending about the same or more online. Global retail e-commerce traffic stood at a record 22 billion, or then record 22 billion monthly visits in June 2020. With the younger generation feeling more comfortable using technology, the move to online shopping and services is likely to increase at a hefty rate. The impact of COVID has brought about this transition quickly, and it will likely last. Next slide, please. Well, with the onset of COVID, many businesses rushed to get online. My parents taught me a phrase when I was younger that haste makes waste. And what that means is particularly relevant in operating an online presence. If you do something too quickly, that's going to cause mistakes that result in time, effort, and materials being wasted. This has become a problem in the online environment. Next slide, please. Despite massive growth in business online, Many businesses are content to leave major decisions regarding online issues to young, inexperienced personnel with little oversight. So imagine if a large retailer decided to build a new store in a growing area. The senior management would probably have someone with experience scout out a location, acquire the rights to the property, oversee the construction, pursuant to a contract, of course, and then have other senior staff address issues of advertising, marketing, security, purchasing, systems operations. And someone would probably be given the role of ensuring that there was compliance, at least in the U.S., with respect to the Americans with Disabilities Act, regarding things such as curb cuts in the sidewalk and parking so that the disabled could access the premises. There are similar rules around the world, but I'm referencing the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, specifically because there are issues involving websites in the U.S. With respect to online presences, either websites or social media, many of these corresponding tasks are left to inexperienced staff who do not have the knowledge about the potential pitfalls. So let's examine these. First, you have structural creation and maintenance issues. It's important to secure the internet real estate with proper domain name acquisition and registration, as well as social media registration, the handles by which a company is known by online. When left to tech people or even independent contractors performing technical functions, domain names can be improperly titled or held. If the domain name is held in the name of an employee and the employee leaves on bad terms, you can expect to be in a fight over that domain name. Or if an outside tech person gets let go or you terminate the contract and they were hosting your site, that person can easily redirect traffic that's intended for the domain to a different site that might not be so friendly to your business. And yes, this happens. I've seen where people have taken websites, redirected it to competitors, or redirected it to pornography, or to some other malicious issue. So it does happen. In addition, if the domain is titled to the wrong entity, any efforts you may have taken to avoid liability, for example, by setting up a subsidiary, those may turn out to have failed. So you might have tried to insulate a company by having someone operate a website, yet if you title it wrong, you might have defeated that purpose. Now, when a website's developed, it's critical to pay attention to certain terms, much like a construction contract would be necessary. So if you're building a building, you're going to look at that construction contract and you're going to take it seriously. So for example, when one needs to ensure that the copyrights to the website, let me put it this way. You have a website, you're paying somebody to build it. You want to be able to use that in perpetuity, regardless of whether your relationship with that contractor fails. So you need to ensure that the copyrights to the website are either assigned or perpetually licensed to the website owner. Otherwise, a business could find itself unable to use its website if the relationship with the developer or the host sours. I've seen this happen as well. In addition, it's critical to confirm that technology used on the site is properly licensed. Otherwise, you could be subject to a patent infringement lawsuit. This has happened in connection with rollover technology. Had a case a number of years ago involving that. And of course, one needs to confirm that there are proper controls in place to secure data, respond to privacy laws, and ensure that the site is accessible to persons with disabilities. These are issues that do not just arise in the United States, but also pertain to websites around the world. And these issues are very complex, and they can vary by region. Many lawyers don't even realize how significant this is, or the differences between the regions. Next, you have those issues that fall under what I'll call rules of use regarding a website or social media. It's the contract between the person visiting the site and the website operator. So a website will need proper terms and conditions, setting forth the rules for the use of the site. These will often include acceptable use policies and conditions for using the site. We're seeing that in the United States now in our political realm, where they're citing to violations of acceptable use policies and preventing certain people from posting information. In today's environment, privacy is also a major concern, and many different countries around the globe, as well as different states in the United States, are enacting their own legislation, from the GDPR in the EU to the CCPA in California, or the recently enacted CPRA in California, which was the California Privacy Rights Act, which was a ballot initiative passed in November. It's incumbent upon the website operator to familiarize itself with the laws of the jurisdiction where the website is interacting with users and collecting personal information, or financial information, or health information. Otherwise, while a business may be operating out of someone's bedroom in one country, they may actually be exposing themselves to jurisdiction and the laws of another country. If you're an e-commerce company, it's important to ensure that you have a comprehensive terms of sale. One may want to set forth payment terms, conditions of return, warranties, and even exclusive jurisdiction for disputes. One must also pay attention to content management risks. This is a rapidly growing area of liability exposure for website owners and companies using social media. Of particular note is copyright infringement. The ease of copying content and images, which is as simple as right-click copy, right-click paste, or Control-C and Control-V, makes copyright infringement so easy on the internet. And still, the majority of people do not realize that just because something is on the internet and you can copy it, does not make it free to use. If you copy something, it's becoming more likely that you will be found. Technology has advanced to allow software programs to crawl the internet and identify infringements. Some sites try to get around this by using technology such as embedding or inline linking, including embedding directly from some of the major social media sites. But this is a tricky area, and the law is not uniform throughout the world. The EU differs from the U.S., and even within the U.S., there are different views of what is permissible. There's a Ninth Circuit, which is the Circuit Court of Appeals that covers California and other states, that has enacted a server test that's about 13 years old, that says if you're not hosting it, you're not liable for copyright infringement. Yet recently, in the last 2 years in New York, which is part of the Second Circuit, that has been challenged, and there are issues with respect to embedding or inline linking. So it's important to know your audience, it's important to know where you are based, and it's important to know the laws that may impact that. Trademarks and trade dress issues are also pertinent. One must pay attention to the proper use of other people's trademarks and to make sure that the marks a business adopts do not infringe on another's mark or design. So you don't want to be putting out on the internet a logo or a trademark without making sure that it is clear for use and does not infringe on someone else's mark. Rights of publicity are also expanding around the globe, as well as within the United States. In response to the ease at which it is to infringe a copyright, many sites have now turned to royalty-free images or sites that offer content and images for use on the internet. However, there's another right that also must be reviewed. and that's the right of publicity for the individual that's in certain images. So just because you license an image from one of these image sites does not mean that you can use it any way that you want. Does not give you the right to use the image of the person in a photo to promote a product or service. And in certain circumstances, you may be even invading someone's right to privacy. For example, disclosing certain sensitive information about them. You need to look at the license for the image that you are acquiring on one of these sites. In addition, the license terms will often limit you for what you can use it for. So a model may have sat for a photographer and had given them rights to exploit the photo, but there might be certain exceptions. So you might have an individual who decides that they do not want to be in an ad for Viagra because they don't want to be associated with impotence. So it's very critical. You need to check how many impressions you're allowed to publish the image on. So you need to check those license terms. And it should go without saying that any statements that you make on the internet, be it on a website or in social media, should be truthful and comply with advertising rules. So, for example, when using celebrity endorsements, or now one of the waves is to use paid influencers, you need to provide a disclosure of that fact. Otherwise, you could be subject to hefty fines or even class action lawsuits could arise. We've seen this happen with certain celebrities who have posted favorable things about products, yet forgot to reveal that they were paid endorsements. Next slide, please. Now, a website operator may also need to have certain disclaimers or advertising notices on their website. For example, although the law in the U.S. varies by state, most states require law firms to have some type of disclaimer or advertising notice on their site. Other service providers need to have it. You have regions that also require notices. For example, German law requires that certain notices be on websites. And these notices and disclaimers will vary by industry and geographic location. Then there are those issues I call special circumstances. These include child protection laws, essentially guidance for how to deal with underage users, and specific regulations for interacting with children. Certain industries require specific action. For example, an alcohol business may require that those accessing their content be of certain age. Healthcare sites may require certain disclosures and disclaimers, and governing bodies overseeing food, health, and other areas may have specific regulations that must be followed. There are also rules concerning interactivity and the host site's exposure. For example, a website operator can be immune from certain liability if it follows a certain set of rules. In the case of copyright infringement, a U.S. website can register an agent with the U.S. Copyright Office, and if the website follows certain rules, takedown rules, it can be immune from copyright infringement when third parties post infringing content on their website. One must also be concerned with the way one talks about others, be it individuals or companies. It's very easy to post something online without thinking and have it turn out to be untrue, opening the post to potential defamation liability. While a brick-and-mortar store will usually ponder the ramifications of statements it releases, in this instantaneous gratification of online interaction, people often speak before they think. And once something is out there, it's always out there. Unless, of course, you're looking for something, and then you can never find it. Finally, it's critical to pay attention to one's audience. As I briefly mentioned before, a store is no longer just serving customers in its immediate vicinity, but it may now be doing business with persons in another city, state, or country. It's critical to know where your customers are and whether there are any local rules that you must abide by when dealing with them. Next slide, please. I've tried to actually use a pictograph of a website to show you where the issues are. And rather than identify some other website, I just decided to use our own. Here we have examples of places where things can go wrong. For example, you'll see on the top there's a search box. If the site is not coded properly, a vision-impaired user may not be able to understand what the search box is for, and thus you may have a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act regarding website accessibility. Careers is another place that offers potential pitfalls. For example, you may have language on there that is not compliant with local law. There are certain areas that preclude language that prohibits somebody with a felony conviction for applying for a job. You may have language like that, and you may violate certain rules. Sections devoted to news about the operator could pose a problem if the operator posts content cut out from a magazine or newspaper or copied from another site without the appropriate license. Next slide, please. I'm going to continue at the middle of the page now. You'll see images all over this page. First of all, they must be properly licensed from the photographer or signed from the photographer, and since images of people are being used, you need to ensure that you have a proper release. And where using graphics, you want to make sure that the license you obtain is followed. If you're going to modify the image or create a derivative work, you have to make sure you have the appropriate rights. Next slide, please. This is on the bottom of the page now, and you'll see you need to make sure that the website has appropriate notices, policies, and verifiable and accurate information. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about the takeaways from this. Basically, online business is increasing, and COVID is bringing that quicker. Attention to detail and rules are important. Do not delegate to inexperienced staff or leave them unsupervised. Think about the issues you are delegating and decide, if this was a brick and mortar business, would I be as lax as I am with respect to how we're dealing with it in an online environment? You should periodically review your website and social media accounts. Website audits can be an effective way in reducing this exposure. In addition, with respect to certain parts of your site, so for example, website accessibility, there are companies throughout the world that will review your site, tell you whether or not it's accessible or if you have problems, and it will guide you through the process of becoming compliant. There are places that will look at your privacy policies, and there are contractors that will do penetration tests to look at data security. All of these things are necessary if you're going to be operating in an online environment. And finally, remember, you need to procure insurance to protect you from online exposures. You would not be opening a brick and mortar business without having proper insurance. Don't forget, you also need that proper insurance for online exposures as well. Next slide, please. So I want to thank you all for listening. I know there is a lot here. There's a lot of details. But the same way you would take seriously the operation of a brick and mortar business, I'm asking you to do the same with your online presence. It is often easier to create liability online than in brick and mortar, and you should pay attention to these issues. These issues, by the way, that I discussed today are not exhaustive. I didn't touch on things such as tax, exportation rules, and the like, but I think that this is a good start. My contact information is here if anyone has any questions, or if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask me now. Thank you very much, and have a great day.